I'm planning to make a Meetups management system with Blazor Server and with vertical slice architecture. This is going to be a full-featured system that is a little bit simpler than meetups.com, but still full-featured. And if you want, you can actually deploy it to a server or on cloud, for example, on Azure, and you can actually use it. That's my goal. And hopefully during the process, we're going to learn about Blazor Server, we're going to learn about vertical slice architecture, and I myself is going to learn about vertical slice architecture. It's actually pretty new to me as well. I'm going to try to use it in this project and see how well it works. Now let's actually talk briefly about what is a Meetups management system. A Meetups management system is basically an event management system, but Meetups is just one of the categories of the events. Because see, when we talk about event management system, there are so many different kinds of events that you need to manage. Meetups is basically one of the simplest event. It's just going to be one single event that is usually happening within a day and has a specific start date, start time, and an end time. It's not going to happen across several days. You don't have to deal with seats, locations. It's basically just one-off events. But there are still huge websites that deal with this kind of business, for example, meetups.com. So we are essentially recreating meetups.com, but with simplified scenarios. Nevertheless, it's going to be full-featured. And let's take a look at the use cases that we are going to create in this project. So first of all, the use cases are grouped into 3 different goals. We have organizer goals, right? We have attendee goals, and we have system administrator goals. So according to the workflow, we are going to go through these use cases very quickly. So first of all, the organizer will need to be able to create meetups and edit or delete meetups. So once we have meetups in the system, then the attendee or potential attendee will be able to browse and discover those meetups, unless the meetups is invitation only. In that case, it's not going to be discoverable. But public meetups will be discoverable, and anyone can browse and discover those meetups. And once an attendee finds a meetup that he or she is interested in, he's going to do a RSVP. Okay, so there's going to be attendance confirmation, potential payment if the meetup is not free. And then we're going to have to generate confirmation emails. We have to allow attendees to cancel RSVPs and potentially request a refund for cancellations. And after that, the organizer will be able to track RSVPs to see a list of potential attendees, send notifications to confirmed attendees. After the event, the attendees will be able to provide feedback, such as rate the event with scores like 1 to 5 stars, leave some comments, and the organizer will be able to view those ratings and comments. Organizers will also be able to track attendees' payments and see their sales. Finally, we come to this system administrator goals, where we just allow organizers to register. And we have authentication and authorization functionalities to allow organizers as well as administrators to log in and allow administrator to handle accounts. And for transactions, because I'm planning to implement through payment gateways, therefore when payment is processed, there's always transaction records that we want to record in the system, right, for different purposes, such as monitor payment logs, for failed and disputed payments, for auditing purpose, so on and so forth. These are the use cases we are going to cover, and in this first video, we are going to cover creating meetups and edit and delete meetups. This is a type of CRUD, and in this video, we are not going to touch payment, including setting price, whether it's refundable or not, and after that, we're gonna work on the attendees, right? Browse and discover meetup. So basically this series of videos will be created in the same sequence that I have talked about these use cases, so that the video series is going to follow the natural workflow. Without further ado, let's jump into Visual Studio and start working on creating meetups. Okay, let's jump into Visual Studio and start creating the Blazor web application. I'm going to use the Blazor web application template. This is the recommended template to create Blazor applications since .NET 8. Now let's click on the next button, and we're going to call our project meetups.web-app. So I want to call this one meetups.web application, and this solution, I'm going to just call it meetups. And then I can click on the next button. And I'm going to select the latest .NET framework that is already released. For the authentication, I'm going to leave it as none. I'm going to start with very lean configurations, and we are going to use HTTPS. And the interactive render mode, I'm going to select server. And the interactivity location, I'm going to use global. And when I select this combination, basically I'm creating a Blazor server application, which means that we are going to use Signal channel to communicate between the WebAssembly code inside the browser and the server. And I'm going to keep this one as checked. We can modify the sample pages, and everything else we can leave them as default. So we can click on the create button. Okay, we have our solution created. We can close this one. We don't need it anymore. We can go to Solution Explorer, and you can see that the solution now is called Meetups. The only project in it is the meetups.web app. Now, because we're using vertical slice architecture, the folder structure will have to be modified. Right now, you have this components folder, which includes all its pages, individual pages, as well as shared components like the main layout, the navigation menu, and the root component. So we have to change the folder structure, but before we change it, we're gonna keep this components right here. We don't want to damage it. I'm gonna just go ahead and try to create other folders that is gonna align with vertical slice architecture. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to create a shared folder, which will be used to extract those shared components out. So I'm going to say shared, and then under it, I'm going to create, because there are different things can be shared, right? One of them is the Razor components. And I'm going to create a Razor components folder, a components folder right here, and then I'm going to move those shared components from the existing components folder to my new components folder. So I'm going to move this nav menu out. I'm going to basically cut it and paste it over here. So you can see that both the navigation menu.razor and navigation menu.razor.css, which is the CSS isolation file, are moved over to the new components folder. Now I'm going to move this layout folder directly from here all the way to the shared folder over here. And I want to move this imports.razor, basically all of these three different things over from components to the shared folder, just like that. And now we are going to have some issues with the namespace in the imports.razor, because you can see that under here, the only thing exists are those page components. So therefore, we're going to come over here and delete this, because we will have some deeper folder structure here. So I'm going to say components like this. And we're going to also reference the shared.layout. And we are also going to reference just the shared folder. Now I noticed an issue here. So I moved the _ imports from the components folder to the layout, to the shared folder here. Well, the problem with this approach is that the page components under this components folder won't be able to use this _ imports.razor file. So in order to solve this problem easily, I'm going to just drag this into the root folder, right? So this way, any Razor components will be able to use this _ imports.razor. So I'm going to go into one of them. For example, looking at this, you can see that the built-in component is actually changing color, right? Using color coding. This means that my references here is actually working. Now let's run the application and make sure that everything runs properly. And our application is running, at least homepage is working properly. And let's go to counter, and if I click on it, it's working. Then it's actually working. It means that a signal channel is established because we're using Blazor Server. So our custom folder structure is indeed working properly. Okay, next we're going to continue creating our custom folders. We're going to create a features folder, and under the features folder, we're going to group some of the features or some of the use cases in different folders. Okay, the first one is I'm going to create a full subfolder that's called events, and then under that we have events related use cases or features. I know that we talked about some of the use cases. Let's move this over here. So we have these create meetups and this one. These two are the ones that we're going to work on first. But I think maybe the first one is missing, which is view created meetups. So this one, we are going to briefly create this slice first, but it's going to be only a placeholder. So this is basically the home page. Once an organizer log in, they're going to see the home page where they're going to see the created meetups. So let's, for now, just define this one. And later, if we want to change this use case, we can change it. Okay. So under this events folder, we're going to have a new folder. So this is going to be our first slice, but it's going to be a placeholder. So we're going to call it view created events. And then under that, we're going to have one Blazor component, and we can call it view created events component. This is basically our home page. So I'm going to have a slash as page directive. So it's going to conflict with this one. So we will have to delete, perhaps we're going to delete this whole thing. Okay, we're going to delete this whole thing. All right, so now we have this as a home page. And before we continue, I need to run the application, make sure that I can see this page. I know everything here is wrong, but I just want to run it and make sure I can see this. Okay, as you can see, I'm seeing this home page right now. And of course, these ones don't have anything anymore. So what we can do before we continue is let's go to nav menu. Actually, let's go to layout. Okay. And we can delete the sidebar because we don't need it anymore. And once we do that, if we run it again, we're going to see this plain page. Well, there is top bar, which we can use later, or we may replace this top bar with something else. But right now we're having a plain page. It's just a page without the sidebar, and that's what we want. Okay. So this is where we see the created events, right? So under here, the reason why I say this is a placeholder is because I want to have a button, right? And when I click on this button, I'm going to navigate away to the create event slice, right? The create event page component. So I can create a button, or I can just use an anchor element. I think I'm going to use the anchor element, which is going to be easier. Here, I'm going to call it /events/create, and then the class is going to be btn primary. So it's going to still look like a button, but it's indeed a anchor element. Okay. So this is all I have in the slides. It doesn't need any service yet, but later when we come back and load the events, load the created events, that's when we need the use case, which is, you can call it service, you can call it use case. I haven't made up my mind yet. Let's just go with the flow. So now I'm going to navigate. So clicking on this is going to take me to the create event slice. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and create another folder. So enter here. I'm going to call it create event. So this is another slice. And this is where we are going to have our page for creating an event. And because of that, I'm going to add a view model here. So I'm creating a class under the create event folder, and I can call it event view model. So here we're going to have a few properties here. We are going to use minimal efforts to make the application going. We are not going to create all of the properties to make it complete in one go. We're going to create little by little. That's my philosophy. So the second one, let's going to call it title, and we're going to add a question mark here. And then we're going to have a begin date and time. Okay, and after that, we're going to have a end date and time. Now we're also going to have location. So it's going to be a string. Let's keep it simple. Just one line of location. You just allow the user to enter the full address in one line. So I'm going to call it location. And then here, I'm going to have category. But this category, this is already a meetup. So for a meetup, a category is usually just whether it's an online meetup or is it in-person meetup. So I'm going to just use a string to indicate that, and then later we can have a let's say a enumeration to display this, and also to convert enumeration value into a string. And for a meetup or any type of event, a very common field or common property is capacity. Okay, so you're gonna meet up with someone, but how many people do you want to meet up? Right? Maximum. So this is the capacity. And then we're going to talk about the organizer ID now. So I'm going to actually create a organizer ID, but know that right now I'm only supporting one organizer, okay? Because I haven't started working on authentication, authorization, user registration. So anyone who uses, which is basically myself, who uses the web application is going to just see one list of events that I created. Right? There's only one user, and I'm having this organizer ID right here, but it's always going to be 0. So I'm going to just leave it like this. The other fields that are related to payment and price, I'm going to work on those later. And perhaps we're going to add a cover image. For each event, we allow the organizer to upload a image so that it can be displayed very nicely. Potential attendees can look at the image and discover your meetup. Okay, so these are the basic view models, but let's define some rules here. So we can use data annotation to define rules and do some validations very easily. For example, this one is required, and a begin date and an end date and time are also required. Location is not necessarily required because it's really based on the category, but I would say category itself is required, right? And capacity, because it is an integer, so let's make it simple. Let's say that it's not required, but if you leave the capacity as default, which is 0, that means it's unlimited. You can have a unlimited space. For example, if you're running a online events with a Zoom account and you have like an enterprise level of Zoom account and you have unlimited user can join, then you don't have to set the capacity. Organizer ID, I'm going to leave it as empty for now. I'm not going to control it because it's going to be controlled automatically eventually when we actually work with organizer. Right? It's going to be linked to the organizer who has logged on to the system. Okay, so these ones are good, and maybe the title we want to limit the string length. And we're going to say maximum length. Let's say we don't want the title to be too long. Let's say there's only 100 characters allowed, and then descriptions. I'm going to add another one, which is this one, descriptions. Let's say we have 500 descriptions, and descriptions is not required. And for the category, as I mentioned, it's going to be an enumeration because we have two. One is we have two possibilities. One is in person, the other one is online. So I'm going to create an enumeration right now inside this create event folder. We want them to be all inside one folder to follow the vertical slice architecture. For some reason, while I'm recording, I'm not able to add the class. So I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'm going to add the class, and then I'm going to resume. Okay, I'm resuming recording now, and this one, I'm going to call it Meetup categories enum. And this is not a class. This is going to be a enumeration. And we have in person, and for this view model, I'm going to define some validation rules right here inside this view model. Some people don't like doing this, but I think it's okay. So I'm going to go down over here, and Visual Studio is suggesting me to do the initialization like this. I'm going to accept it. I think it's okay. And now I'm going to create a validation method here. I'm going to just say validate, and you can see that Visual Studio is smart enough to generate some of that. So begin date has to be earlier. I would say you can't let them to be the same, otherwise your meetup is lasting for 0 minutes. It doesn't make sense. So I'm going to do this. So as long as this is greater or equal to the end time, I'm going to return false. Otherwise, this is true. So I'm going to add some other rules. So here, I'm going to change this method to say this is validate dates. So I'm going to create some specific validations for specific things. So another validation is that location is required when the category is in person. So I'm going to say bowling, and validate capacity is something that Visual Studio generated, which makes sense, but I'm not going to use it because this actually reminds me that capacity, yeah, I'm going to add a range. I'm going to add a range annotation here, and then minimum is 1, and maximum, I'm going to say integer maximum value. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try to do another one. Validate capacity is still showing this. I'm going to go ahead and do validate location. And then it's generating some code. I'm going to see whether I can use it. So if category equals in person to string, and location is null or empty, and I'm going to change this to null empty or null or white space. So this is null or empty or white space. Then we're going to return false, otherwise we return true. Okay, and this also reminds me that if it's online, then we need a meetup link. So this is only required if the category is online. So same thing, validate meetup link. So Visual Studio is smart enough. All right. So same logic, if category is online, and if meetup is null or white space, or meetup link is null or white space, then it's going to return false. And this is going to return true. Any other things that we need to validate? I think we're good. So we have this event view model, and we are going to go inside this create event slice here and try to use this event view model in actual Blazor component. So let's go ahead and try to create the component. Again, I'm not able to, so now I'm resuming recording. Coming back over here, let's call it create event or create meetup. Whether you want to call it event or meetup, it's up to you, because you can expand this project into a full event management system. And then instead of creating a clone of meetups.com, you can probably create a clone of eventbyte or ticketspice. So create event component.razor, and I'm going to just temporarily call it create event, just like this. And here, first of all, we're going to create a private field here. And the type of this is absolutely just the event create model. Okay, just like this. It's generated for me. And unfortunately, it doesn't know where it comes from. This is weird. Why it doesn't? No, it's event view model. I don't know why it's saying event create model, but let's change it to event view model. And then change this one. Now we have the event view model. What we can do is to go ahead and create an edit form. Let's go down a little bit. Okay. So I'm gonna say edit form, and then the model is basically underscore event, and not sure why it doesn't show me the completion. Underscore event, yeah, underscore event view model. Let's change this as well. Copy this one over here, and let's close it quickly. Otherwise, there are too many red stuff. Okay, now, inside the edit form, I want to have data annotation validator, of course, and we're going to have a validation summary component as well. So validation summary component, and then we're going to have our bootstrap classes. So this is going to be, why it doesn't generate for me? Class, it was able to generate, it's showing something, it's just flashing, right? Div, okay, it's generated something for me. Let's see. Form group, yeah, let's try to use this. So we have title, we want the title to be here. That's correct. But we also want to close it, right, to get rid of the red squiggly line, and we also need validation message, and I'm going to say for title. Okay, now let's see whether it can generate the next one. Is it too fast? It doesn't generate. Okay, it doesn't want to generate anything for me anymore, so I'm going to just copy and paste it over here and just try to duplicate stuff. So we have title, we have description, so this one is going to be description, but this is description as well. Let's, maybe if I change this one to description, it's going to help. Is this going to, no, it doesn't. Okay, so this ID, I'm going to change this one to description as well, and this one to description. Okay, the next one is the dates. Is it the dates? Let's oh, now it's generating. Okay, so date, it just doesn't generate the complete thing, which I can't complain because it's already generating a lot of stuff for me. All right, so we don't have a date, we actually have a begin date time, begin date time. So let's go ahead and let's use begin date time, right? And let's copy this one over here. So once I'm here, I'm feeling a little bit difficulty of having just begin date time and end date time, because how am I going to receive the time portion along with date? I'm not able to do that, right? So what I can do is I have to go to event view model and then go up over here. I think if I add so if I have this one as date only and this one also changed to date only. Now, if I have required and adding another one, and this one is going to be time only. So I'm going to say begin time. And I'm going to change this one to begin date and this one to end date, and duplicate this one to have end. This would be much better in terms of having a UI and bind to the edit form. But the problem is that the initialization and validation wouldn't work. So let's actually delete them and regenerate them. Let's say public and then event view model. So I'm just waiting for Visual Studio to generate code for me. So I have to take advantage of this AI thing. So begin date is, I'm using date only, right, from date time, and time only. So this is good. And then I'm going to still wait for AI to generate code for me. Okay, so let's take a look. If begin date is greater than end date, that's false. If begin date equals end date, but begin time is greater than end date, that's false. And otherwise, it's true. So this is pretty good logic. So we can work with this, hopefully. So let's go back to the UI. We don't have this property anymore. Let's work with begin date. And then let's just call this begin date. And this one is begin date. And this one is begin date as well. And this one. I'm going to duplicate this and change this one to end date. And I'm going to copy and paste these to these places. Okay, now I'm going to add another one. This is going to be the time only thing. So this is begin time. And then I'm going to go over here and say begin time. And I'm going to just duplicate this everywhere here. Okay. And now I'm going to copy this one and paste this one over here. And I'm going to do a search replace. and search begin and change it to end and replace. So this begin doesn't change, but this begin changed to end. So everywhere is changed to end. It's good. All right. So far we have title, we have description, begin date, begin time, end date, end time. And let's check the model over here. What else are required? We have title, description. These are all required. Location is not required unless the category. So let's work with capacity and let's work with location. Okay, let's for now only work with what do you call it? The in-person. Okay, so we can come over, actually, let's come over here. Let's only work with in-person for now. So the category, I don't know why, it probably heard what I said. This immediately generated this line for me. Okay, so let's work with category, and then the location would be required now, right? Because our custom validation over here. So let's go in here and create another one. So here, I'm going to have the location, and this is input text, and change this, all of these to location. Maybe here, I'm gonna call it venue. Is it venue? Like this, venue address. This one to location. So as I mentioned, I want to have minimum code for now, and I think these satisfies all of the validation that we have so far. And capacity, maybe we're gonna deal with this later, but right now we just need to be able to actually save something into database. So we have this form, and then I'm gonna add a button over here. So this type is submit, and we can call it create. Yeah, we can call it create. And then maybe we're gonna add a space here, and then we're gonna have a cancel button. So if for some reason it knows what I'm gonna try to create. So going back to events, what is our URL? I think it's home. It's a homepage, probably homepage. Well, let's use homepage. Eventually we have to change homepage to something else because we have organizers and we have attendees. Let's use homepage for now, and let's actually run this. I want to see whether the create event page components layout looks correct or not. So we have this created events thing, and we have this add button, but we didn't add the caption. So that's pretty weird. Let's go back over here. We didn't add this caption. So I'm gonna say add, or let's call it create new event, or let's say create new meetup. Okay, we can call it event in the code, but in the caption we want to say create new meetup. Now let's do a hot reload. Did I close it? Okay, probably I closed it. Okay, I didn't close it. Okay, so create new meetup. I'm gonna click on this, and it's going to go to /events/create, and it says it's not there. So I'm going to just copy this, and probably I forgot to add the page director. This is very important. We add this page director to indicate this is a page component. Basically it works as a page. Now if I do a hot reload, changes cannot be applied. Okay, let's just rerun it. And then now let's click on this create new meetup, and we're seeing this form, right? We have a begin date, which is today's date, and then we have a begin time. Is it because I forgot to change the type? Time is, yeah, it's input date. This is wrong. So this needs to be changed to input, and then the type needs to be time, right? Because we don't have an input time component. You can see we don't have an input time result components. So I'm going to use just the element, and then we cannot use bind dash capital V. We can use lowercase v, and then we can say begin time. And let's copy this and paste it over, not this one, paste over here to replace it. So this is not begin time, this is now time, and we're going to copy this and replace this. All right, hopefully this time it works. Okay, it's refreshing, and now it's picking up the current time. You can see it picking up the current time. If I click on this, it has this nice control over here, and end date and end time. All right, that's pretty good. And if I click on the submit button, it should have validations going on here, and click on cancel button, goes back over here, and we can go back and forth. This functionality works pretty well. Now coming back over here, we can work on the submission here. So when I say onValid submit, so this onValid submit just means that it goes through the data annotation, right? Data annotation validation works. Then we're gonna do our custom validation. So when I say create event, and then we go down over here, we can say private void, create event. And if we want to have this console write line, we can have, I don't think we need it for now, because especially this is Blazor Server, so we can definitely debug if we need to. Okay, so we have this event handler here to handle that submission. And first thing first, we're going to do a whole bunch of validations. So this event is only triggered when the model, the view model here, passes the data annotation. So definitely this is going to be having something. We don't need to validate whether it's null or not. Right? So what we can do is we can take this, and then copy this and do this and paste it over here, and then we can say dot validate. So it has many things. So we can validate dates, and if it falls, right? So if it's not validating, then we need to do something. We need to display the error message. But I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to continue with my validation code. Okay, and I say next validation is validate location. Okay, and then I'm gonna paste it again, and then say I validate meetup link. Now we are going to have a error message in each one of those cases, but I don't want the error message to come from outside. So I'm gonna modify. I'm gonna go inside here. I'm gonna change this to string. Okay, so if nothing is wrong, I'm going to return string.empty. Otherwise, I'm going to return the actual error message. So here, for example, I'm going to say begin date should be earlier than end date. And this one, I'm going to say begin time should be earlier than end time. This one also change to return string. And I can say location is required. If I want to be specific, I say location is required for meetup. And here, I'm going to just return string.empty. So same thing here, I'm going to return string.empty, but here I'm going to say the meetup link grammatically correct. So I'm going to say the meetup is required for online in-person meetups, online meetup. And I'm going to change this one too. Okay, now go back to the UI. So here, make sure it returns empty string. And if it's not empty string, I'm not going to go ahead and create an event, but I'm going to create an error message here, and I'm going to initialize that. And then this error message is going to be assigned to validate dates, and then I'm going to test the error message. If it's not empty, that means validation failed. Right? I'm going to return and display that error message. So same thing here. I'm going to do, so actually I'm going to combine this and this together, and then I'm going to duplicate this 2 times, and I'm going to delete these two, and change this one to validate location, and this one validate link. Okay, and then we have different error message returned over here, and the error message needs to be displayed on the top over here. And since we're using Bootstrap, so we can use a Bootstrap alerts. Right? So if you go to documents, right, and scroll down and go to components, you can see we have alerts, and the alerts are basically a ribbon, and you can place it anywhere you want. And in order to create it, for example, if we want to use for validation purposes, we can use this alert -danger, and then we can copy this and come over here. We're going to place it on the very top, right? So this can actually be extract it out. But we're going to work on extracting this out later. So here, we can say we're going to have a error message. Actually, this has to be declared on the top. So like this. And then this can be deleted. So the error message is going to be displayed right here. But if it has nothing, then we're not going to display it. So when I say if it's not something, if it's not empty, then I'm going to display it. Remove this. I'm going to use the generated code. All right. So here we're going to perform our saving logic, right? But we're going to keep it empty for now. Let's run the application. Make sure the custom validations also work. Okay. Something wrong is this. Oh, returning equals. That's wrong. We're returning empty. Okay. Run the application again. Okay. So we have this, and then we have this actual parentheses here. I don't know where it comes from. Let's fix this first of all. So on the top, let's go to the top. Okay. So we have this actual parentheses. Let's remove it. Run it again. Now it displays rejoining the server. And so first of all, we need to pass these logic here. So I'm going to say meetup 1, and then capacity must be between 1 and, so capacity right now is 0. So that's wrong. So let's fix this. I want it to be from 0. Okay. And rerun it. Okay. Now change. Now enter the first meetup and then click on create. So it says the location is required for in-person meetup because our meetup is currently initialized as a in-person meetup, right? So therefore, location is required. I'm going to enter location. So I'm going to say first Bloor Street, Toronto, Ontario. And then if I click on create button, it's fine. It passes all the validations. So let's trigger some wrong things. I'm going to change this one to April 2nd, okay, and then click. So begin date should be earlier than end date. This validation works. Let's change it back. And then the time thing. So this time we're going to change it to, maybe change this time. Maybe change this one to 7. Click on create. It validates the begin time, which is correct. If I change the ones to 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. But 2 p.m. is already in the past. That's a new validation that we need to work on, right? So let's go to here, validation date. So we need to merge the begin time with the begin date. And also we need to merge the end time with the end date. In order to do that, I can create something like date time, and then I'm going to say combined begin date time. Right? I'm going to combine them together, and it's actually generating logic for me, right? Everything is generated properly. Okay, I'm going to use this logic, and I'm going to do the same thing for end time, and it hurt me, so it created this line for me. All right, now I'm going to display the error message. So this is exactly what I want. So if the begin date time is smaller than now or earlier than now, that is wrong, right? And same thing with the end. So here, if I do this, is it going to generate it? So combined end date time should be, if it's smaller, then it's wrong. And also so here, and then you add equal sign. But then in this case, other logic that I need to cover. Yeah, I can have this. Okay, I think all of these validations are good, and we need to make sure we test these validations. Okay, let's come over here and let's call it meetup 1 again, and let's make sure the begin time is not in the past. So I'm gonna change to 3 p.m. right? Right now, did I change it to 3 p.m.? Not yet. Right now it's 6:38 p.m. right? So this begin time is not valid. So it says the begin date and time should be in the future. This validation is correct. So I'm going to change to 7. Okay, and then click on create. And then it's saying, well, the begin time should be earlier. So then I'm going to change this one to 10 p.m. Okay, and then click on this. And then it's going to complain about location. And I'm going to just say Toronto Street, whatever. Right. And what else do we need to cover? To cover the case that it's more than 2 days, more than 24 hours. So let's change the ones to April 3rd. And then click on this, and it says the event should not last more than 24 hours. All of the custom validation also work. Now we can continue. Now let's continue working on the creating event service, and then we can use the service to actually save the event. Okay, so right now the validation logic is here, and once we create the service, we're going to move the validation logic into the service. So let's go ahead and try to create a service right now. Let's go to create event folder, and then let me pause the video, try to create a class. Now this service, I'm going to just call it create event service, and all of the logic that for creating the event will go over here. So we will have a constructor, but we're not going to use it now. We're probably going to use it later. First of all, we can have a validation method here, and we can have it returning a string, and we can say validate event, and then we can pass in the event. And for that, we can say event view model, and then pass in the event like this. Now we can use the event view model to validate it. But first of all, in this case, we want to cover the case where the event view model is now. So we can say if it's now, then we need to return an error message. I'm going to say the event is now, and that's it. Otherwise, we're going to return empty string at the end. But then once the event view model is not empty, then we can use the other validation logic, which we don't have to write it again. We can go to the component, and then I'm going to take this, cut it, and paste it over here. Now I need to declare this error message variable and assign empty string in the beginning. And then I'm going to change these variables to event view model. So each one of these returns will return the error message. So I'm going to copy this, paste it here, this one here as well. So this is our validate logic. And we have these green squiggly lines. It doesn't recognize that I've tested the null value already. So I can use a else statement. And then I'm going to move the logic inside. So now we are facing these green squiggly lines. That because I have a string without question mark. So this would help. So we have error message, and we're validating, and if the error message has a value, we're just returning the error message. And by the end, if there's nothing, if validation passes, we'll just return an empty string. So now we can use the create event service inside the component. And before we do that, we can do a dependency injection. In the program.cs, we come to the top where we can use the builder.services collection to add that. So we can say add transient, and now I can add the create event service. Then I can go back to the create event component over here and go to the top, and then I'm going to do a dependency injection into the component. So create event service can be injected like this, and then come down over here and do create event service and validate event, and I'm going to say error message equals this, and we have to pass in the event view model like this, and then we get this. Oh, we'll return an error message. Okay, we're going to work on the save event later, but right now we want to test our create event service for validation purpose. So let's run our application. Let's click on this create new meetup, and then these two we'll have to fill up first because it's data annotation. Now you can see that the dates validation are working, well, at least start working. So I'm going to change this to be in the future. Begin date and time should be in the future. Well, this logic is wrong. Let's go back over here and see. All right, so it wants the begin date and time to be in the future. So I'm going to change this one to April 3rd. And the time, I'm going to change it to 12. but it cannot be 12 a.m. It's to 12 p.m. And then I'm going to click on create button. Now it's validating location, right? So I'm just going to enter some address and then click on the create button. So now it passes all the validation, which means that our create event service is working for at least validation purpose. And then we're going to continue with actually saving the event to a database. I'm going to first of all add my code to source control. Click on create and push. Now because we're saving data, we're going to use Entity Framework Core. And for that purpose, we're going to come down over here and click a new, create a new folder, and I'm going to call it data. And inside the data folder, I'm going to create a subfolder and I'm going to call it entities. And for now, we're going to have one entity, which is the event. And the view model would be almost exactly the same. I think in this case, it will be the same. So let's go ahead and go to the event, the features folder here. And then let's basically just copy this event view model over. So I'm going to copy the whole thing. And then I'm going to go to the entity folder, click create a new class. And this, I'm going to just call it event. So I'm going to replace this with what I copied, and then I'm going to remove this. Okay, we probably don't need a constructor in this case. And definitely we don't need validations. So we can, these validations, because we already have validations in the view model. And then we're going to leave these data annotations on here, especially the string length. So when we use Entity Framework Core, these data annotations can be detected by Entity Framework Core in order to determine some restrictions on each one of these fields in the database table. So I'm going to go ahead and create another class. And I can call this one application DB context. And this class will derive from DB context. So of course it doesn't actually have DB context because we need to add packages, NuGet packages. So let's go ahead and try to add 3 different NuGet packages. Let's go to browse, and then I'm going to search Entity Framework Core. Well, I don't know why it knows exactly what I need. So I do need Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. So I'm going to click on install and I accept. And then for migration purpose, I need Entity Framework Core.design as well as Entity Framework Core.tools. And it's right here. So we have tools and design. So I don't know whether Visual Studio is just listening to me. Hopefully one day I can just say, I want to make this project, and the Visual Studio will generate the project. Okay. So design is installed, or is it tools installed? I forgot which one I clicked on. Okay, tools are installed, and now let's install the design package. Okay, design package is also installed. Now we can go back over here, and then we can do a control dot to import a namespace. Now we have DB context right here. Now I'm going to create a constructor in order to configure the application DB context to target specific connection strings. And again, Visual Studio is so smart that it knows exactly what I want to do. So I'm just going to accept everything. So DB context options, I'm passing in the same class as this. So we're saying that we're going to configure for this DB context with the options that later we're going to configure in the program.cs file. And then we don't need to do anything inside the constructor. We just need to pass the options to the base class in order to basically at least to pass the connection strings to DB context. Okay? And then we're going to set up one table. So a DB set is basically a table, and we're going to use the event, and that's it. We're using plural, and I like to use a question mark over here. And for now, we only have one table, and we can follow convention. We don't need to override the on model creating and build any relationships or change column constraints or definition. We don't need to do that. We can just follow all of the constraints. So we have this, and then we can go to program.cs to try to configure Entity Framework Core. So let's go to program.cs over here, and now we can configure DB context. And by even just writing this comment, You can see that Visual Studio knows exactly what I want to do, but there is actually a problem. Let's accept this code first, and then we're going to actually import a namespace so it knows where this class comes from. But we cannot use DB context. We have to use DB context factory. Okay, so we have talked about this. I haven't talked about this in this video, but I have talked about this in my Blazor courses. I have 2 Blazor courses where I talk about everything about Blazor. One of them is a deep dive course. The other one is a project based. So the reason why I have to use factory is because we're using Blazor Server. And because we're using Blazor Server, we're using Signal channel, which sustains a WebSocket channel, and it lasts forever. Well, it's not forever, but almost forever, which means that the interactions between the browser and the server can cross many interactions. And this makes it a multi-threading scenario. But NET Framework Core is not thread safe. Therefore, if we just use regular @db context, it's going to create an instance of the DB context, and it doesn't know exactly when to dispose it. If we use a DB context factory, it's going to create a short-lived DB context. Is always going to be immediately disposed, so it's much safer. Now, we don't use the in-memory database. We're going to use SQL Server, right? And then we're going to just get a connection string from the configuration, although we haven't configured yet, but we're going to just create it right now. So we can call it default connection, or we can change the name. Let's just go with default connection. Well, later we're going to have identity. So default connection, yeah, let's go ahead with default connection, and later we can have another name for the configuration. So let's go to app settings.development.json, and then here we can have configuration connection strings, and then here I can say the default connection string is blah. So we don't have the database yet, but we can go to Server Explorer, and let's try to add a connection. And I'm going to connect to my local SQL Server. If you don't have SQL Server installed, try to install the SQL Server. I cannot use Windows authentication. In your case, in most cases, you should use Windows authentication. In my case, it's just that something wrong with my SQL Server installation. So I'm going to use SQL authentication and use SA. Password is probably this one. I'm not too sure. And don't forget to check this. You have to check this. Okay, and then I'm going to open it up. If this works, it's going to open up, because I don't remember the password now. So yeah, okay, so my password works. So I'm gonna re-enter the password just to make sure I do remember the password. Okay, the last. Okay, I'm gonna select master database because I don't have a database yet, and then I'm gonna click on OK. All right, so this connects. It basically revives my previous connection, and then I'm gonna go to properties, and here I have the connection string property here. I'm going to copy this and paste it right here. Now you can see that the password, it doesn't like it. Well, it's try to hide it. I'm gonna just enter my own password right here. Make sure you have this trust server certificate equals to true. And then the initial catalog, I'm going to just change it to Meetups, or you can call it anything. Okay, so we have the connection string right here configured. We're pulling the connection string using the options, and then we configure the @db context factory. So this option that contains the connection string will be used inside here, right, to configure application DB context. So I think we have everything configured for creating a database with only one table, and later we're going to run migrations to add multiple other tables. So now let's go to Tools and NuGet Packaging Manager right here. So my recording has to be paused, otherwise Visual Studio doesn't work. So I'm going to pause it and continue later. Okay, so I went to Tools and NuGet Packaging Manager, and then this NuGet Packaging Manager console is opened. So I'm going to say add migration, and I'm going to call the initial migration just init. And I only have one project, so I don't have to be careful about the default project. But if you have multiple projects, then you need to make sure that you have the correct project selected right here. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter right here, and then you can see that it starts building already. All right, so the initial migration C# class is created. And where is it? So it should be created. Okay, so it's created right here. That's fine. We can leave the folder right here. We don't have to always customize folders. So you can see that initial migration class is created right here inside the migration folder. And we have a create table. We have a up method and down method. All of the columns are created. So you can see the event ID by convention is treated as a primary key. And with an increment, right? So it's this identity with 1 and 1, a primary key, which corresponds to the event ID. Okay, so now we can run migration. But before we run migration, let's open up SQL Server Management Studio. Let's log in and let's open up databases. And you can see that we don't have Meetups database yet. And let's go over here and let's run the update database command. And we can specify a specific migration, or we can just use the latest. So we don't have to specify the migration name. So I'm going to just say update database using the latest migration. Now it says build succeeded. Now it's running all of the SQL command into create database and create a table. So now if I go to database node and refresh, and where is my meetups? Right here. So open it up. I have table right here. This is my one table. Well, another table. This is the migration history. Okay, so we have this table created with many columns over here, and later we're gonna modify these with migrations. But right now I have this one table created, and I can use the application DB context now. So the way to use it, let's go to create event service right here. I'm going to dependency inject the application DB context factory right here. So I have to, well, I can't just dependency inject the application DB context. I have to inject the factory. Okay, so I DB, and then I say context factory, and then I provide the DB context type. So in my case, it's application DB context. And I can say this is a context factory. And then I can do a control dot to create an assign field like this. Okay, this Visual Studio helps me to do that. I don't have to write all of this code. So I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to go down. So validation is on the top, or you can say it's on the bottom. So I'm going to keep it on the bottom. So inside this create service, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say void, and then you can see it just automatically generate everything for me. I'm going to just accept it. Okay. And then we're going to examine what is actually going on here. So I have this context factory, and then it's creating the context for me by calling the correct method. So factory, create DB context. And then we're using a keyword here, right? So this one is going to dispose the created variable once this variable goes out of context, which is this curly brace. Okay, so it's great. It's great. So in order to get rid of the screen line, I'm going to use this, and then entities.event. Well, let's just delete this, and then I'm going to do a control dot, and I'm going to import namespace automatically on the top right here. Okay, so it does all of the mapping for me. I don't even need to use auto mapper. And for demonstration papers, I'm not going to use auto mapper. If you want to use it, you can use it. And here I have a choice to use the async version or just synchronous version. I think I'm going to use asynchronous version. I'm going to change this to async and then task. And then if you want, you can say create event async, or you don't have to. Right? This is just a convention that I decide to follow this time. You don't have to actually have to follow. Okay. So now I'm going to change this one to save changes async. And because I used async, so I need to use await. All right. So what is happening here is that we pass in the event view model, and then we create an actual model, right? Actual event model. We add that to the context, right? The DB context. And then we're calling save changes. So when this happens, an entity from core is going to go into the DB context and find all of the ones that are marked as changed. In this case, this is a new, right? So basically that's still a change because it wasn't there before. And then it calls the save changes method to save all of the things that have been changed to database. Basically generates corresponding SQL statement and push the changes to the database. Okay, so now I have this and I can use it in the component. So I'm going to do a control comma, and then I'm going to say create event component. As the project becomes bigger, we can use control comma to navigate. We don't have to use the solution explorer all the time. So let's try control comma, and then let's go to the eraser component. Okay, so here I'm going to say if the error message actually has stuff in it, I'm gonna just return, right, like this. Otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and save it. So for saving it, I think it generated some code for me. Okay, so good. So we have this create event, but it should be create event async, right? And then there's a green squiggy line. So here I can say async and task, and here I can do await. All right. So let's give it a try and see whether we can save the event in the database. Let's run the application again. Let's click on the create new meetup, and then let's say meetup 1. This is the first meetup, and then we're gonna change this to be, let's say tomorrow, or next Monday. Okay, next Monday, 10 a.m. to again next Monday, and let's say 11:30 a.m. So 1.5 hours. And then click on create. Now location is required, and let's enter a proper address. So First Bloor Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I don't know what the postal code is. I'm gonna create it without the postal code. So clicking on the create button, it's supposed to create an event in the database. Let's hope that happens. All right, I think it's created. We probably need to navigate away from the screen, but don't worry about it. Let's go to the database, and let's right click on this and select top 1000. Let's see whether we have a row in the table. Okay, so we do have a row in the table. Let's check the dates. So next Monday from 10 to next Monday 11:30. That is exactly correct. And now I'm going to check in my code over here. I'm going to just use the master branch. So here we're going to say create event in the data. Let's say implemented, saving the created event in the database in the SQL Server and push. Now, in order to actually see the events, we're going to actually implement this view created meetups. Okay, we need to do this because I originally planned to do the create meetups and this one in this first video. So maybe we need to change it to create this and view it right here. So this will be in the first video, and the rest I have to rearrange. Okay, so let's go ahead and deal with the other slice. So we completed one slice. Now you have a taste of the vertical slice architecture. Well, I have a taste of that. This is actually indeed the first time I tried this architecture. I do still have doubts with this architecture. I would still prefer at this moment, I only tried one slice, I still prefer the clean architecture, like the basic clean architecture without mediator, without CQRS. I think that architecture will be very good for big projects, whereas these vertical slice is probably only good for smaller size project. But I have a bias. I just have a bias at this moment. I do see some benefits of using this. You can see all of the related stuff for this use case is within one folder. So you are able to locate the things, and it's very good for maintenance later. And usually what's actually creating problems for a software development project is really this part. Once you finish the project and then just a few months later, a change that needs to be made, and you just very hard to locate the code that is all related to just one use case, right? You take the functional design document like this, and you look at this, oh, create a meetup. So where is it? Because whether it's a clean architecture or not, most of the architecture is horizontal slices, right? Horizontal layers. And those horizontal layers are very often, they're made not based on business logic, but based on technologies. So that makes it very hard to locate the stuff that you want. With the clean architecture that I'm referring to, at least you can locate the use case. But comparing with vertical slice, almost everything is within one folder. From that point of view, it's definitely easier for maintenance. Probably because of this, you have fewer chances to make mistakes. Okay, so let's go ahead with implementation for the next slice, which we have already started at the beginning, right? Which is the view created events. So once we created this, let's go back to the create event component over here. So once this succeeds, we're going to have to navigate away, right? Navigate way to this view created events component, which is another page, right? So over here, I'm going to dependency inject something else. And that is our navigation manager. And let's scroll down over here and let's use our navigation manager to navigate away to the root. And at least for now, the created events component is the root. So we're navigating to here. Now between this line and this line, we need to create a list of components, right? And for that, we're going to go ahead and create a service. So right click. I hope this time, okay, it doesn't work. Let me pause the video. So we need to create the service. And usually we just follow the convention with using the same wording as the folder. So I'm going to call this view created event service. And again, we need to dependency inject the IDB context factory. And with the application DB context in it, I'm going to do a control dot. And now we're going to get the events. You can see that Visual Studio suggests this. Let's try to see whether this is good or not. So control dot to import the namespace. Now we have context. And then now you can see that here, I think it's complaining that this could be empty. Right, so what if I just add this one here? Well, it doesn't fix the problem. I don't know why. It doesn't fix the problem. So what we can do is, if this result is null, we know it's not going to be null, but it's just Visual Studio wants to be extra safe. So we can say task.from result, and then we can create a new list of event like this. And if we use another parenthesis around this, yeah, that removes the green screen line. Okay, so we are basically loading all of the events from the events table. Right. Of course, later this has to be changed, probably for multiple reasons. And one of the main reasons is that we're only loading events for a particular organizer, right? And later we might implement filtering because we don't want to load all of the past events, because the user may not want to load all of the past events. But for now, let's load all of the events, and then we can go back and see how we can implement this one. So here, of course, first of all, we're going to dependency inject the view created event service. Right, we're going to do it this way, and I forgot to do the dependency injection here, so let's do it here as well. So builder.services, view created event service. I'm gonna import namespace, and then let's go back over here. So here we need to initialize some code here. So let's see whether Visual Studio generate codes. Okay, so Visual Studio generates something for me, and now I just realized that we have a view model for the event, and we have an actual event model. So for this particular project, it may not make too much sense to use view model. One thing is because for this project, most of the objects would be exactly the same for the view model and for the actual model. It's not an AP, and secondly, it's not an API project where the data is going to be transferred over the internet, and you want to hide some of the sensitive information. So if you want, go ahead and just remove the view model and just directly use the actual model itself, then you can do that. You save yourself some time for converting between view model and the actual model. But for this video, I'm gonna just stick with view model and the actual model, and then we're gonna use AutoMapper. Yeah, I was saying that we don't need to use AutoMapper, but looking at this, well, as I'm programming, I feel like I need to use AutoMapper because I don't want to convert things all the time. Okay, let's use AutoMapper. Let's go to Solution Explorer, and let's go NuGet package. Well, you can come over here, go to Browse, and let's search for AutoMapper. So AutoMapper, and it should have this AutoMapper extensions, Microsoft dependency injection. I think this is the one that we want to use for ASP.NET Core project. We'll click on install. Okay, so it's installed, and now let's go to the shared folder, and let's create a mapping profile. So I'm gonna say this is a mapping profile, and this derives from profile, and I'm gonna do a control dot to import namespace AutoMapper. And once I have this, I can try to accept you can see that it generated this mapping for me. So this is mapping from view model to the actual model, and I'm going to create another one to match from the actual model to the view model. Okay, and now let's go to the one that we created already, which is the create event service. And over here, I'm going to create a new method. I'm going to say new variable, and this is going to be I'm going to call it event entity equals, and then I can use mapper. So the way to use mapper is, first of all, you need to dependency inject the mapper inside it, and you can use mapper, and using mapper, we do control dot to initialize the field. So we have a mapper right here, and we can use the mapper like this, and it generated the code for me. So we're going to map from the event view model to the actual model here. So this one is the actual model, okay? And then instead of doing this, we're going to say event entity, feed the event entity over here. Okay, so now let's go back and see whether we can actually, let's delete this. It's automatically generated for me. So now I'm going to rerun the application. Okay, rerun the application. The purpose of this is to verify that the code that we created previously for creating the event still works. We don't want to write a lot of code and then test. We want to write a little bit and test a little bit. So where this problem comes from. So view created service. I think it's probably we're missing a parenthesis. Okay, let's run it again. I just realized I didn't do a dependency injection. So I need to come to program.cs and do the dependency injection. So this is adding services to container. This is configuring DB context. Let's add automapper. Oh, it's already doing that. Does it generate code for me? Okay, it does. Okay, good. So we have the mapping profile injected, and let's run it again. All right, let's go over here and let's create meetup number 2. And description, this is our second meetup. Okay, and I'm going to change this one to from Thursday to Thursday. And then this is to 12 p.m. And then I'm going to create this. And I'm going to say this is 2nd Bloor Street, Toronto, Ontario. And click on the create button. All right, let's go over here. Run the query again. So we do have our second event, which means that our automapper is working properly. So then we can come back to the folder over here. So remember I was saying that we can use control comma to navigate, but because we're not actually using layered data structure, layered architecture. So all of the code we're looking at is actually within one folder. I mean, almost, right? Probably over 90%. So we don't need to worry too much about control comma. We can just use Solution Explorer and then just go to the slice and we have everything there. Okay, so here we need to go to view created events here. So instead of returning event, we're going to return event view model. So like this. And then we need to think about where we place the view model. Right, so replacing within this is probably not a good idea, because we're dealing with events here, and let's actually keep this events view model inside here. So I'm not too sure. We're gonna probably deal with, because the way we structure this is we have events, right, and then we have we structure this is that we have organizer goals and then we have attendee goals. So even for the attendee goals, we have RSVP. And yeah, let's just for now, things are not clear. I'm not actually sure where to properly place this event view model. Because I was thinking about dragging this inside the event folder. At this moment, I'm thinking about maybe I shouldn't put the events here as the folder name here, right? I should say like user goals, or there might be a better way to structure this. So let me think about that for a little bit. I'm thinking there could be a more reasonable way to structure the folder to have the folder structure. But for now, let's go with the existing one. I just feel like it's a little bit strange when I have to say get events and then I'm returning an event view model and this event view model comes from a different slice. I feel a little bit strange. So, but let's go with that and then we're going to fix that later, because for me, it's actually the first time to use vertical slice as well. So let's try to learn together. So this is returning a list of actual events, right? So we need to convert this into this. So here I can say return. Well, before I do that, I need to, again, dependency inject the mapper stuff, the mapper variable here. And once I do that, I can come over here. I say mapper, and then it generates the stuff for me. Okay. I think I think this is correct. Okay. So now I'm going to copy this. Did I actually do the dependency injection? So program.cs. So I did it already. Okay. So now let's go to Solution Explorer. Let's go to components. And I did this already. So here I want to override. I don't want to override the uninitialize. I want to override the after render async. Yeah, I want to do this. And I do need to check whether it's the first render or not. Well, the reason why I use this instead of the uninitialize is because of the pre-render for a Blazor server, as well as for Blazor WebAssembly. Right? For both, you're gonna encounter this pre-render issue. And one of the ways to solve this problem is to use after render async. And then you just implement this. If it's the first render, then you do your initialization inside this if statement. So this is where I'm going to load my event. So created events view model. There isn't this class name. It's a event view model. Right, and then I'm gonna do a control dot to import a namespace. Again, it's pretty weird to import from another slice. I know that. I need to think about that and then come back and solve that problem. Okay, so bear with me. So inside here, we need to do our initialization, and I'm gonna use this to load all of the events. Right, so here I'm gonna say async, and then I'm gonna say event await. So I do have all of the events right here. Well, I shouldn't use events. I'm going to use created events like this because I already created that variable there. Okay, so I have the created events, and then between these two lines, like I said, I need to render the HTML markup. So if created events is not now, and at the same time, the created events count is greater than 0. Now I'm going to render the events here. So how should I do this? I think it makes more sense to actually display in a table, in an HTML table, because for the organizers, if I'm an organizer, I want to see each one of the events, and I want to see important information about the event, like the begin time and end time, the capacity, the attendee that is already registered, right? I need to see all those information. At this moment, I don't have all of that information, but I think a HTML table is better for that purpose. So I'm gonna have a table, and then I'm gonna use just a table class. And as you can see, as long as you wait for a little bit, it generates a lot of stuff for you. So I'm gonna accept it. And one of the things I want to change is that I want to also add the table dash striped class here. So I don't want to display the description, but I do want to display the datetime. But I'm gonna delete this row, right? And I'm gonna delete this row. This column. And I'm gonna delete the location as well. Do we actually have capacity? Yeah, we do have capacity. So coming back over here, I think we do need to have capacity displayed here. Capacity, all right. And description, we don't need it. But for the begin date and time, I want to show them together. So I don't need this column. And let's try to just put them together with a space like this, and then we'll see what it looks like. Okay. And same thing with the end date time. I'm going to go over here and delete this end time. Location we don't need. We do need the capacity. And later we can add like registered attendees once we work on the attendee goals. Okay, now will it work? So here, once we do this, we need to call the state as changed. Otherwise, it's not going to re-render this. Yeah, I think we are okay. Let's try this. Let's try to run the application again. We do already have existing events created like this, so we should be able to see at least 2 events. Okay, so you can see we have 2 events. We don't have any capacity because when we create the events, we didn't have the capacity field, and 0 just means unlimited, right? So this we can add a little bit of logic at the UI level, because it's actually a UI logic. Well, at least you can consider this as a UI logic. So we can say that if this equals to, we can have explicit Blazor expression like this. So if it's 0, then I'm gonna say unlimited. Otherwise, we can say created event capacity to string. And did I make a mistake here? It doesn't like the syntax. Okay, so it doesn't like the syntax. That's fine. We can use some code block here. So we can do something like this, and then we can accept the logic. So it says if capacity is 0, then we display this. Otherwise, we display created event capacity. So as you can see, you can actually use Visual Studio's AI capability, right? Do something like if I cut it off and then I say if capacity is 0, then display unlimited. Otherwise, display the actual capacity, right? And then you make this a comment, right? By doing Control KC. Now, if you hit enter and wait a little bit, it's going to generate this code for you. And of course, it doesn't know that this part needs some special treatment, but we can add that. We can add the text element, special element. So this is good, and let's run it again. So here's displaying unlimited for both events, and that's correct. And we do have the begin date and time displayed properly for each event. Okay. So now let's try to follow the structure that we have already. Let's click on the create meetup, and then let's create meetup number 3. And we say this is the 3rd meetup. The time, let's say we're gonna do May 1st to May 2nd. Let's see. Then we have location issue. So and say first Toronto Street. I don't know whether there is Toronto Street or not in Toronto, but let's try to do this. So this is 24 hours. I don't know why it doesn't complain. I thought I implemented this validation that should be less than 24 hours. So let's go over here. Do we have a 24 hours thing here? Yeah, we do. So it's probably, let's try to, I need to verify that this logic still works. I need to do this. So begin date should be in the future. Okay, so let's change this to that. And then this one to 5 and click on create. Okay, so I guess it was considering my previous event, meetup number 3, was using a correct duration. Okay, click on cancel and coming back to created events. Everything looks correct. So now let's check in the code. So implemented view created events slice. Well, not completely implemented, but this is just our first try. So let me check in the code. And now I need to address one issue before we continue. I don't think I need this events folder to group these slices. I want to use a simpler approach. So I need to reorganize these things. I'm going to move this directly into the features folder so that under features, we just have slices. Okay, so, and then let's delete this events folder. I don't have anything in it, so let's just delete it. And then click on OK. Okay, so we have the create event folder, we have the view created events folder. So now if we open up the features folder, we see both, and both of them are slices. Okay, so it's very clear that each one of the folders are just slices. And later, once we have many features, we might want to group them. I just don't want to introduce complexity at the very beginning. It's not actually a good practice. I wasn't thinking clearly at the beginning. So now let's use a very simple approach at the beginning, and then later, if we need to have that complexity to handle the complexity nature of the project, then we can introduce a better grouping. So here we have this. This solved my problem, but we have this event view model that is right here, and this is wrong too, because it's also referenced by this, and we have different approaches to solve this problem. Okay, so and this is actually a typical problem with the vertical slice project. How do you handle shared objects? Okay. One approach is that you recreate this definition for every single slice, and that doesn't make too much sense for me. Coming from a layered architecture, I just feel wrong to duplicate the view model for each one of these slices. Especially the view model will be exactly the same. Of course, it will be simpler because we don't need the validations for the view created events. And that's definitely a consideration. Now I'm thinking about it. If I don't need the validations, I just need to copy this and then just duplicate it here. Well, that's a consideration. However, it also means that whenever you need to make a change, you just have to go through all of the event view models in different slices and make a change to each one of them. So that would be a pain. I don't like that. Of course, the second, I would believe that's the only second approach. Right? There are only two approaches. The second solution to this is to just do it in the shared folder. So I tend to use the second one. I'm going to just right click and it doesn't allow me to do it. I'm going to pause the video. You see what I just did? I created this view models folder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this view model into the view models folder right here. Okay. And yeah, it adjusted namespace. That's pretty good. It's automatically adjusted the references as well. And you can see that it changes 13 files. Mapping also, you can see automatically folder, the namespace are adjusted. So hopefully everything still works. And let's run the application. I'm going to do a Control Shift B to build the solution, because my right click on the solution explorer doesn't work. So now you can see we still have some namespace referencing issues. So let's solve those problems. So it doesn't know where this come from, right? So we'll have to, I think we can come over here and copy this and go to our imports. And then let's go over here and just paste this. Hopefully this solved our problem already. Let's go to error list. Go over here. Well, it doesn't work. Event service it doesn't recognize. That's really weird because it's in the same folder. This is pretty weird. Maybe there's some issue here and I don't see the issue. That's pretty weird. Let's try to do a build again. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna close the solution and I'm actually gonna close Visual Studio and then I'm gonna reopen it. You see the color coding is not coming. Something is definitely wrong after we reorganize the folder. Now it's coming. It's just taking a little bit of time. So it's still complaining I don't have the create event service. That's really, really weird because it's in the same folder. So I'm gonna do a control dot and import a namespace here. I don't feel like this is correct, but I don't know why it's doing this. It's probably just because we removed the events folder. So I don't think we need this anymore. We do need this, and this service should, anyways, everything should be working now. Let's do a Control Shift and B again. Okay, the build succeeded, and let's run the application. Okay, so we're loading the created events already. Let's go ahead and try to create some events. Before we create events, let's go cancel, coming back, and we're still loading the events. That's good. Let's go ahead and try to create another one. This time, meetup number 4, and this is the 4th meetup, and we're gonna change this one to, let's say, May 28th to May 28th as well, and the time will be, let's say, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Venue is just some random address. Click on create. Now everything looks good, everything's working. Let's stop here for now, and then we will continue from the next video. If you enjoy watching this type of video, definitely please give me a like. This is really going to help me to grow YouTube channel and continue providing free contents like this. All right, we'll see you in the next one.